Welcome everybody, we're here in Aston Court for our own version of the BBC UCISA question time today. Welcome to the audience, welcome to the online audience, and welcome to our panel. We have, for those of you who weren't here yesterday and have not maybe heard James speak, we have James Clay, who is the project manager for Building Digital Capabilities project with JISC, and James is live blogging through the event. We have Fiona Handley here, who's a senior lecturer in learning and teaching at the University of Brighton. Fiona's digital literacies framework that she spoke about this morning has been cited by the QAA as a model of best practice. And we have Sue Watling, who's academic advisor for TEL at the University of Hull. And Sue writes a weekly blog on the Digital Academic, which is about the use of technology in education. And we have Jane Secker, whose role is Copyright and Digital Literacy Advisor at the LSE, is Chair of CILIP, the Information Literacy Group, and co-founder of Lilac, and Jane's new book on copyright and e-learning comes out next month. And it's co-authored with Chris Morrison. So we're going to take the first question now from Jenny Brown. Jenny, where are you? Would you like? Yes, thank you. So, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, so yesterday I tweeted the question, how many higher education institution training teams are able to show their value beyond the happy sheet? And I'm not sure that you guys can necessarily give me a number, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas on whether that's valuable, and if so, how to go about it.
Okay, thank you.
Is it 6? That's the number, Wang.
So I'm going to put that question to Jane first.
Okay.
James, you can have it next.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's 7, I think. Yeah, not 6. No, I think there's a number of ways that I mean, obviously one of it's very nice to have a happy sheet back where everyone ticks and says, yes, I learnt, I enjoyed this a lot, but it doesn't tell you anything about the people who never ever come to your training sessions. So you've got to think about quite a range of metrics, I think, and measures to sort of really show how you're making an impact. We have done some work thinking about Kirkpatrick and thinking about the 4 levels at LSE, and as you well know, Jenny, but it is kind of, I think, about seeing how you might have changed people's practice, so sending out surveys several weeks or months after people came on courses to sort of ask what they've learnt and what they're putting into practice based on what they did in a session some time ago. And I think it's also about collecting kind of more qualitative research. So that's a way, obviously, if you do focus groups or interviews, to reach some people that don't ever come on the courses and workshops you run, but also maybe a way of finding out a bit about you know, what people think in a bit more detail about, you know, what they really learnt in the session, rather than them just kind of telling you nice, warm things, such as, yes, it was great. I mean, I think, you know, nobody really wants to go on a course and hand it back to the person where they've really slated them and said, you know, this was awful and a complete waste of my time. Not that many people do.
No.
James?
To me, value is about the impact that the training has, and it's not about the value of the training. So to me, it's about, if your training is about improving digital capabilities in order to provide a more compelling student experience, and what the result of your training is that we've seen an improvement in student satisfaction, that's great. Just switch it around, change the word from IT training to diversity training. The point of diversity training is not to have good, fun, entertaining diversity training. The point of diversity training is in order to produce, you know, to get rid of discrimination. And that's the impact. And it's the same with IT training. The point of IT training isn't to have great, fun IT training sessions. It's about improving the student experience, improving productivity, improving efficiency. And that's how you measure the value.
Jenny, you want to come back?
How do you go about ensuring that you can show that? So I think one of the things that a lot of people miss out as they design training programs, is what is the impact we're trying to have, and how are we then going to measure that? So how do you ensure that you build that into your process
You do what you just said at the very beginning. You think about what are we trying to achieve here and then take it down. If it's about providing a compelling student experience, what does that mean, and then break that down in terms of the sort of training that's required. Often we look at training as in because it's shiny, because it's new, because it's tools. We don't think about the strategic reason why the university exists. We don't think about the student experience. We don't think about productivity and efficiency. And that's a starting point. Obviously, there are other factors, and you need to take that into account. But the question is that of, saying that you may have had an impact, is that more useful than saying, look, we've got lots of happy people, but they're not doing anything with the training?
Okay, I'm going to give the other panellists opportunity to answer the question now. Fiona, do you want to go first?
Well, I would agree with what's been said, really. I think in terms of assessing impact, obviously that's going to be big on our horizon going forwards. But I think you have to be clever and you have to do planning, basically. And, we're all getting more into the routine of doing that kind of thing. And it's not just in technology. In all of the academic development stuff that we do, we're continually thinking about how we measure impact. We're careful about what measures we decide to use. We try to talk more about improving, changing student learning environments, rather than saying that we're going to increase student learning, for example. So it's just being savvy about that kind of thing to make sure that you really can measure things.
And I think it just comes back to this, that we need to talk. We need to talk to people. We need to create situations whereby we can follow up what's happened in a workshop environment. Invite people to come back and discuss maybe 6 months down the line. Well, what difference has it made? Has it made any difference to your practice? If not, why not? And what can we do to help that happen in the future? Just building those opportunities for conversations. So it's not a one-stop shop training session, but it's part of something bigger that goes on and on into the future.
Has anybody on the floor got any experience of doing this level? We have a point here, Ian.
Can you hear me now?
Got you.
We're looking at return on investment in our training courses now, and it isn't easy, as you say, and you do have to sort of try and embed it early on if you can. It's not just about the happy sheets, as you say, but it's about those follow-up consultations, whether they're by phone or by face-to-face. But I did go to a really interesting talk by a company called Blue Beetle, who actually, there is a calculation that you can look at that does talk about the costs of the training, the hours that are involved in the training, and you can actually use an algorithm that will help you to actually get an actual real figure in terms of the cost to the business, and that can then help you quantify that training and whether it's meaningful, not just in terms of whether you doing the other stuff as well, but the actual cost, which is usually what your managers are usually looking for in order to justify having those courses, as well as the other information. So yeah, I can sort of share that, tweet the link to the algorithm and the calculation if anyone's interested in that.
Mm-hmm. Has anybody done this? Do we have experience where managers have looked at the information and used that information? Jenny? And James, do you want to go first?
I've actually, I have to admit, not quite IT training, but when I was managing libraries, yes, I was once a librarian, managing libraries, they used to measure quality not just by happy faces, but also by the number of books and the number of resources and those kind of, and it's like, that's not about impact, that's not about value, that's not about what you're doing. And what about those people who don't go to the library in terms of doing it? Because they're obviously, and it was like getting to really rethink about what they were trying to do and what were the purpose and focus of that behaviour. And that's exactly the same with IT training teams or any kind of TEL development. It's about what are you trying to do. It's not about the training, it's not about what you're doing, it's the reasons for doing it in the first place.
Okay, and Jenny, you had a point.
Well, this is something that we've been looking at quite a lot at LSC and trying to ensure that we are able to measure it. We have measured it with students, but possibly more interesting is that within the IMT department we have started to measure the feedback as well as 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the line, the impact that it's had in the application. So we're asking questions about whether or not people have applied the learning that we've just spent $2,000 to send you on this course. How have you applied it since then? If you haven't applied it, why not? And this is helping us to make sure that we're sending people on the right courses at the right time. We have about 72% or so who actually apply it. Well, what are we doing with the rest of them? If they're not applying it because it wasn't at the right time, how can we be more effective? So we haven't got huge amounts of data on this, but we're using this to help us improve our provision across a whole range of topics and ensure that what we're doing is done at the right time.
Okay, anybody else want to comment on that? Not too controversial. Okay, we'll move on to the second question, which is from Fiona Strawbridge. Oh, Fiona has a mic already.
I have the mic, yeah. So I was just wondering if you thought there were ways that we might use, first of all, the video that Martha Lane Fox did for us yesterday, but also how we might be able to develop the relationship with her and with her .everyone organisation. So when I say we, I mean we as UCISA.
Okay, Fiona.
Well, I probably am going to answer slightly differently, given that I'm quite new to UCISA. But in terms of the sector, I thought that video was really inspiring, and I thought her earrings were amazing. I've got a really strong visual impression of her, as well as the words, so it has had a very profound effect on me. But I do wonder how she can concentrate with like those balls. So my takeaway from that video was about was mostly about thinking about technology for change and change in the wider world, and that idea about social justice and technology playing a key role in that. And I'm thinking about how we develop curriculums in universities and how we can talk about, move the debate away from digital technologies being about the future to saying actually the future is social justice, it's dealing with sustainability, it's dealing with global awareness, and technology is one of the tools that we're going to take that forward, and we want to make sure that that's in the curricula. So that's what I took from that, is a kind of inspiration about how we can make a change in the world and how we're all part of that bigger movement.
Okay. And do you have any ideas about how we can use that?
I think I think promotion, and there's lots. I think there's lots of little sections that you can pull out and redistribute. You've got a lot of Twitter followers. You can break that up, spread the message. I think there's lots of ways you can use it, and she's certainly a very engaging character.
Jane?
Yeah. If I can just say something about the experience that we've had. So I'm chair of the CILIP Information Literacy Group, and we formed a relationship through doing advocacy work with Maggie Philbin, who leads a project in schools called Teen Tech, which is helping sort of young people get engaged with science and technology. But one of the things through sort of reaching out to her and getting her to recognise that librarians had a lot to contribute here, and that we were calling it information literacy, but she could kind of see immediately that teaching young people research skills was hugely valuable when they're doing sort of a science project. So we've ended up having a really good relationship with her. We sponsor an award that's very prestigious for the group, presented at the Royal Society, got to meet Prince Andrew and go to Buckingham Palace, but it just means we've got a very kind of a high profile advocate for the work that we're doing. So I would say that this could only be a really good thing. And I think Martha Lane Fox is also involved in Teen Tech, so be really interested in trying to join all those things up and talk about kind of digital capabilities and information literacy, research skills, how professionals in higher education can help there.
James, you want to add anything?
I was reflecting on this because I think we had a conversation yesterday, and it was So, you know, the concept of building digital capabilities across those parts of the population that don't have high levels of capability, it's got to be a good thing in terms, because we're going to be recruiting these people, and we may be recruiting them into different parts of the organisation, not necessarily the academics, but the business support, the professional services and everything else. And if they've got good digital capability, it means that communication is going to be more effective and all those kind of things. So I think it's really important that we don't just think about our own blinkered internal looks, we think about the digital capabilities and skills of the population of the UK. So I think it should be encouraged.
And is there anybody on the floor wants to comment or come up with any ideas and any suggestions?
Can I just say, Gillian, I think you had an idea yesterday, which I was going to sort of plagiarise and repurpose, but would you like to say what you came up with? If you can remember.
It was last night.
Okay. Well, actually, last night happened in between, yeah. No, something odd's going on. Lee? Never mind.
Lee, we've got something on screen.
Yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
I'm sure it'll go. It's gone. Right. No, I think you were suggesting that maybe we could get students in our institutions to do work through Everyone, reaching out to the disadvantaged, the digitally disenfranchised groups, which seems quite a good way to feed back something, as well as using an alliance with her and with Everyone.
Yeah, the Everyone organisation is looking for partners and people to get involved with it, which could be you as institutions, it could be students. We're looking at what we can do with UCISA to get involved. We don't know the answer to that at the moment, but we're looking at it. And with students, we were talking about a thing that I ran years ago when I was teaching in FE, where we got a bunch of my students to teach people out in the community internet skills. So they ran a cyber cafe. Students were really nervous, but after it, they were really buzzing about it, and they felt, you know what it's like, you've all taught, you know it much better when you've taught it yourself. So it really raised the level of confidence of the students. Of course, it's good for employability skills, etc., etc. So that was one idea that I rehashed from years ago last night over dinner. But partnerships is another way that we can look at that they have on the Everyone site, and I think there'll be a tweet going out in about half an hour with a link to that. Sue, did you have anything you want to add?
I think the relationship could be really useful in terms of raising awareness of the need to have this baseline of digital skills. And sometimes you get the feeling that people within institutions are not always listening to us, but they might well listen to somebody like Martha Lane Fox if she's saying the same thing. And I think there's the Go On website, I think, is associated with Martha Lane Fox, and they have some useful baselines of digital literacy criteria. And again, I think there's some work that we could do to reach out beyond the university to see what's going on, within the wider society with regard to digital literacies and building that digital capability. I think there's quite a lot that we could look into discovering around building on that relationship.
Yeah, the Go On organisation has just merged with Everyone last week. So it's now one and the same thing. Their agendas are very much the same, to raise the digital skills of the section of community that haven't got them, to get 50% of women into technology, so maybe anybody wants to comment on that as well, and to work for social justice and enhancement, to have better technology and better systems. And they're working with the health sector at the moment, things around like end-of-life projects to put technology into end-of-life care, so it's better all round for the carers, nursing staff and the patients. Did anybody else have any other suggestions? Questions? No? Okay, let's move on to the third question then. So that is from David Walker.
I'd just like to ask the panel, building on what we discussed yesterday, a lot about innovation yesterday, but how do we build space within our workloads to allow us to innovate in the way that we've discussed? That protected space, I think it was Hamish that brought it up in his presentation yesterday.
Good question. Has anybody got any answers to that one? Let's go. James, would you like to go first?
Innovation. What is it? What's the definition of innovation, David? do you mean to do something it basically means to do something different, not necessarily better. Part of the issue I always have with innovation is that people perceive innovation to be a straight line. Do it in your direction. No, innovation is messy, it's scribbly, you go backwards and forwards, more of it's coming like that, and I'll tell you, in terms of doing that, that's great. And so absolutely we've got to create protected spaces for innovation. The problem that I think we have within education, and it comes back down to that love of the shiny, is innovation is, one of the things, do a Google for it, the JISC R&D pipeline, innovation pipeline. It's a really useful way of rethinking your thoughts about innovation. What happens is you have a discovery phase, and that's where you need that protected time to discover what can these things do, what's the opportunities, what are the pedagogical problems that we're facing, that maybe we can find some technical sort of going through those kind of things. But often what we do is we then go, right, we've done that, oh, something else, here's another shiny thing. And if I say things like iPad, PLE, MOOC, FAD, shiny, I mean, it's just things, but how many of those have entered the mainstream? And what about those mainstream technologies like PowerPoint and email, which seem to be totally embedded into people's practice? That was never done through innovation, or may have been done in the very early days. But I think one of the key things about protected spaces is about innovation, and it comes to that kind of silo mentality, is innovation should never be done in isolation. Innovation needs to be about bringing people together in teams from different aspects to ensure you get the stakeholders, the consultation and the buy-in. So if you've got a technology-enhanced learning team, they need to be people bringing in from IT, HR, finance and all those other things. But the same goes for those other professional services. When finance are bringing in a new system, they should also be bringing in the tell people, the academics and so on, to get that buy-in. It's about work. So the question is, how do we create protected spaces? It's about, how do we create connected, consultative spaces to allow innovation to happen in our institutions? I feel like I just keep saying the last Labour government now.
Jane, do you want to?
Well, I think it's about it is about time and space, and the kind of the protection to kind of play with things and to be creative. But I think it's also about many innovations come about through people trying lots and lots of things that fail. And I think we're not very good at recognising that it's okay to fail. So I think there is, because of an emphasis on saying we need some sort of return on investment, there is a sense that teams such as the learning technology team, who spend time investigating things that might not actually turn out to be of any value, are wasting time and wasting money. And we've got to kind of create a culture in higher education where we say, actually, that we are going to do lots of things that are going to fail, because that's the way we make progress. But I don't know how, because I think it is about changing the culture and getting other people to see that, and having a special team that's kind of tasked with, our department are called Learning Technology and Innovation. We're supposed to suddenly be the people that are innovative. That puts great pressure on a team, but it also makes other people think that they aren't there to have ideas. So in some ways I wish we lost that innovation kind of tag for our team, and could say everybody across an institution can be and should be innovative and try things out and be prepared to fail.
Can we afford to do that?
Well, I think we can't afford not to do it, so...
Being devil's advocate?
Yeah.
I think, David, maybe when we're talking about innovation, I think maybe what we're trying to do is move away from that discussion about training and that kind of idea that there's this technological body of knowledge that the trainer is then going to pass on to your customers in the university. And I think that's probably, as soon as you step away from that to think about combinations of different things or different, then you're immediately stepping into that zone of innovation. And I guess there's different ways different institutions will promote that. I think that if we want to embed this kind of practice, whether or not we do, it's got to be through things like job descriptions and through descriptions of the roles of services and what they do. Because that's ultimately the way that you can protect space for that to happen, is if it's part of your job, and that's that's how it has to be, but ultimately you would perhaps want that to be at a higher level in terms of strategy within an organisation, to say, okay, we're a creative, innovative university, and one of the ways that we're creative and innovative is through our approach to digital technology. We've got a service who embraces innovation, and we give time to their staff to be innovative. So, you know, it's got to be a whole institution approach, effectively, hasn't it, really?
So we add that to the job description along with digital capabilities, digital skills, innovation.
And then drop the training bit.
I should point out that digital innovation is within the digital capabilities framework. So it's already in there in terms of doing it.
Sue?
I still think there's a place for reward and recognition. And if your institution's serious about graduate attributes, about working to support students to leave the institution and take up their place in society, then we have to have space for creative digital thinking, but that space has got to be recognised and rewarded. And I think that's the sort of space for innovation that I've seen work in the past, and I think there's still a space, a place and a need for that in the future.
David, do you want to add anything? Challenge anything?
I think I would start by saying I agree exactly with what Fiona and Sue have just said. I mean, an example I'd give you from a previous institution I was at, I had a conversation with the head of school who was talking about how they'd established a balanced profile of a workload model for all the staff within their school. And he outlined how it came together, and not one element of that related to professional development. There was no time allocation there, so there was no linkage to their ongoing development. This was a discipline where it was essential that they kept pace with changes in a fast-moving sector. So I think aligning it to the criteria of a job or a capability is a very good move. It's a bit like an assessment task in that sense. But I think we need to look at workload models and think about how we can give people protected time to do this and recognise that it's essential that they do it.
Anybody else want to add anything?
Can I just come back on time? Okay, because I think time, how many people here hear the excuse, I'm sorry, I would like to do that, but I don't have the time? Put your hands up. Just check. Okay. Ask me if I have a dog.
Have you a dog?
No. Ask me why.
You don't have time.
I don't have the time in terms of doing it. So the question is, who here has a dog? How do you find the time to have a dog? It's the things that's doing it. It's not about time. It's never been about time. It's all about priorities and what's important to you. If a dog is important to you, you will find the time to walk that dog, pat that dog, wash that dog. If learning technologies is important to you, as probably is for most people in this room, you have found the time to develop the skills and capabilities to do it. When someone says, I don't have the time, what they're actually saying is, I'm sorry, I need to prioritise my time to do something else. I'm being prioritised to do something different. I'm being prioritised to be different. Time is static. There is only 24 hours in the day, 7 days in the week. Unless your name is David Tennant, you do not have the ability to change that.
Okay, right, thank you. So we're going to go to Brian Irwin for the next question.
Hi, this is a question I asked actually yesterday to one of the panels, which was as students tend to come and go quite quickly, how do we keep effective partnership across that? And I mean, you know, and I mean, even in 1 year, often it seems like students are barely there. But often courses, master's student, a lot of people are gone really quite quickly from the university.
Yeah. Okay, Fiona.
I've done lots of partnership working with students' unions over the years at various institutions. I have to say, sometimes it works brilliantly, and sometimes it doesn't work so well. I think, from my experience, actually, you can work with SABs and it can be fantastic, but depending on your institution, there's also staff, the student union staff, or the permanent staff, are also a kind of real gateway into understanding their initiatives and their priorities within each kind of institution's students' union. So it's worth developing relationships with them as well as with the SABs and obviously who they represent, the current student body. I think generally across all partnerships it always has to be about, it's like any kind of good relationship. You need to invest time in developing partnerships by making time to do things together, and that's actually quite hard when we've got, you know, we're working on projects which could be, you know, kind of quite blinkered and quite focused on just our needs as a particular service to achieve things. So in terms of the partnership working that I've been involved in, I think possibly the Students' Union is in some ways some of the easier partnerships, because they are keen to be involved in the kinds of initiatives that we are interested in. So things like digital, also pedagogic stuff that involves students. So that's all very positive. The harder people to work with, I think, are, and let's hope there's nobody listening here from quality assurance, but and I used to work in quality assurance, so they are harder to communicate with because of their the different language that they use, the different timescales of the things that they want to introduce and roll out. Obviously, I want to work, you know, I work very closely with learning technologists because I work in the Centre for Learning and Teaching. So we have a very close relationship with learning and technologists, and that works because we're kind of singing from the same hymn book. So those are all relationships that we've nurtured across different projects. The hard facts about partnership working, I would say, are about different timescales. So there's, you know, you've got a priority, you've got to get partners on board, you want to work with them, but this isn't their priority, it's your priority. You've got to do a lot of advocacy, a lot of nurturing, a lot of managing people who aren't kind of part of your team, and that's a struggle. But the reward is that you've got something which is truly embedded and is drawn from across a whole institution, rather than being just you, your idea, and your team's idea. So it's worthwhile. That's what we're doing it for.
Okay, I'm going to come to Jane next.
Yeah, with our student ambassadors for digital literacy, we've put a lot of effort, really, I guess, into trying to recruit students early on in their career, and focusing here, because we have a huge number of master's students at LSE, but we're focusing on undergraduates because we feel there that the investment that you can get, if you can get a first-year student engaged, you've got potentially 3 years of them. So I had the first student who was what we call a senior ambassador, graduated last summer, and she's actually stayed in contact while she's in her first, she's just about to get her second job, actually. So we've done some sort of impact studies of how it's affecting her career. I've got 3 more students about to graduate, but what I'm trying to do is to recruit students, so it's a kind of rolling on, rolling off process, you know, so that I'm not about to lose my whole cohort of senior ambassadors. I've got quite a number lined up who are going to be in their second year next year, who are keen to get involved, to be a senior ambassador, to act as a mentor to the younger students. And I think it's just a kind of constant, you know, sort of cycle that you've got to, as students are graduating, get new students. But I think working with the sabbatical officers is really hard when they're only there for a year. And the first year we had great support from our education officer, who really got digital literacy and technology. We've had several other sabbatical officers who are engaged, but they've actually come to some of the workshops and said, wow, I just learned loads there, I didn't know any of that stuff. So, you know, sometimes your sabbatical officers are not going to be the digital literacy champions because they haven't got those abilities themselves, you know, and you've kind of got to look at what motivates somebody to be a sabbatical officer is going to be quite different to what motivates a student who's interested in digital literacy sometimes. So,
James, do you want to add something?
Just to kind of agree with the rest of the panel, I think, but one of the things I would say is this is a problem that's going to happen every year. So the thing to think about is how do you build those partnerships? What's the process for doing it so that it's consistent from year to year? And then maybe we're thinking more about systems and processes to make sure that partnership works. Because the problem with depending on, you know, like you say, you find a great individual, but if when that individual goes, it falls down, and that shouldn't happen. And that's about thinking, you know, what are we going to do? And I'm looking at Sarah Knight here in terms of the student digital experience. Is, you know, that process of finding out what your students want doesn't happen just once, because those students will then move on. It's about having that process in on a regular systemic way of doing things, so that you can then build those partnerships quickly. What's the induction program for those new sabbatical officers? What's the process of getting them involved? What's the process for getting them engaged? Think about it from that perspective, and then it doesn't become the issue.
Yeah. And make sure you get your project in the handover notes from one SAB to the next one coming in. It's like practical, practical stuff like that means that the SAB comes in and says, right, oh, that's what I should be doing. Get in touch with so-and-so.
Sue, what do you think?
It's an observation, really. I mean, I agree with all the ideas that you've been putting forward. And I know from experience it can feel like really hard work when you're starting anew with a set of new student reps and a new student cohort. But from my experience, the rewards of working in close partnership with students, they far outweigh the disadvantages of losing them on that annual cycle. So just an observation that for all the difficulties that's involved, it's always worthwhile.
And I wonder if we've got any evidence of where those students have got too hard to reach academics, the ones that we were talking about this morning. Has anybody in your experience, those student ambassadors or the Students' Union, managed to influence areas where you haven't?
I think we've certainly seen that at LSE, that we've had academics saying, well, what is all this digital literacy stuff then? My students keep talking about it, and kind of getting more engaged with TEL projects, kind of getting engaged with using technology themselves, and kind of just recognising, because it's a kind of bottom-up coming from their students. We certainly had that last year with our head of one of our academic departments, who changed their attitude quite substantially towards our department based on sort of saying, well, we seem to have quite a lot of students very interested in this thing called digital literacy. Perhaps I ought to find out what that is and, improve my own skills. So
right, yeah.
we've had some success there.
Great. Brian, do you want to ask anything, add anything, challenge anything?
No, I mean, I think one of the things I would say is, we've had mixed experiences with it, the officers, I think in the same way the panel talked about. And I think we ideally want partnership to be something that involves a much wider group of students, more so than, even ambassadors. We do have some students who work with us and things, and kind of, our ideal sense of partnership is quite a huge range of students getting involved in their own experience, like was talked about yesterday. But again, that makes challenge when we have a maybe 3 or 4 year change projects around shifting the culture towards digital or things like that, of keeping that continuity. So, but I mean, there were some good suggestions, I think, for keeping that forward. I think it's just a challenge we probably have to recognise and work with too. So.
Yeah. Anybody else? Sarah.
Sorry, it was just to say that there are some really great institutional examples now that you can actually go and have a look at. And through the work of the Change Agents Network, we're starting to identify institutions that are investing in this approach top-down as well as bottom-up. So, organisations like Lincoln, Birmingham City University, the Exeters, the Winchesters, they've now in their sort of 3rd or 5th year of actually working on these models, and have got very different approaches and different strategies for sort of sharing. So do have a look. First point of call is the Change Agent Network, can.discinvolved.org, where they've got the institutional case studies there. And at the event next week, where we've got 200 staff and students coming together, we've got 24 showcase projects of institutions that are starting out from those that are more sort of experienced. So there'll be lots coming out of that event to also help echo, and take you forward on this journey.
Oh, another point?
Just to follow that up, Essex has a very good scheme called Front Runners, and we basically, there's sort of a pot of money that's used to employ students, so that departments, sections, whatever, can employ students for a period of time, and to work on specific projects. But the reason it works so well is because of the way it's framed and the way it's structured. They're very limited hours per week, so it doesn't disturb their studies. When you apply, you have to be very clear on what the benefit for the student is, so it's not just about yeah, we're going to get someone in to, you know, make us tea or whatever. And they also get training on, you know, making sure that they note down the skills that they're learning as they go through. So, you know, I know not every university is going to have the benefit of something like that, but from our point of view, having that kind of structured process so that we're clear when we employ them what we expect, they know what to expect, and they just get a bit of money as well, and great experience for them. But having that framework is really useful.
Okay, right. Oh, next question. Right, can we go to Julie Adams, please? Right, and this is the final question.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask the panel, each of you, what key messages are you taking away from this conference?
Thank you, Julie. Okay, who wants to go first? James?
No, we'll let Sue go first.
Thank you. Quite a few times I've heard the expression, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that we need to maybe revisit some of our traditional approaches towards working with academic staff to develop digital literacies, digital capabilities. So I think I'm taking away that you have to make it relevant. So you've got to work within the subject discipline to find out how best technology can support at a subject level. You have to make it different. I thought the box activity this morning was really quite interesting. Yeah, not everybody wanted to engage, but once they did, they found it a worthwhile experience. Make it experiential. Obviously look at ways in which you can incorporate digital into CPD and make it rewarding. I think I like the Jane with her fortune cookies and the suggestion for chocolate, and I've set up some collaborative team working with staff where I always take a tin of biscuits. So these are the areas that I'm going to take away with me, I think. Yeah, we've got to maybe think about doing it differently to how we have been doing it.
Fiona?
I think I'm going to take away a message about changing identities. I think there's, you know, a lot of the discussion both here that we've had in this room and over tea and coffee and over a drink have been about people's roles and how we've kind of come to this talking about kind of training teams, and you know that panel discussion yesterday was very much about, we sort of said, well, actually, you know, we're not really doing training anymore anyway. But it's about shifting. So the realisation that training is no longer something that we're automatically doing in universities. We're already doing something different. But when we think about the breadth of the changes that have taken place in terms of IT training, and I'm thinking of things like students as partners, thinking about things to do with, you know, all of the kind of stuff to do with digital literacies and partnership working with people like me in learning and teaching. We already see that, you know, barriers are being broken down. We can talk about power relationships. There's shifts going on in this area of work, which I think are only going to escalate over the coming years. And I think probably we will be having a very different discussion in maybe 3 years' time about the role of IT and IT training, because the whole landscape around this will be changing very rapidly.
We'll come on to that later next with Helen's presentation. But Jane, what are you going to take away?
Well, I think something that I kind of already thought was really important was about kind of how we communicate about digital literacies and the terminology that we use, but it kind of struck me even more so. I think that language is really important, and the language is really important because it can help us collaborate. I think that's how digital literacy as a term actually has been really quite helpful. It's brought quite a lot of professions together. So I've been to quite a range of events where, you know, different professionals are talking about digital literacy all of a sudden. Maybe we're not talking about the same thing, and we need to kind of examine that. But I think that collaboration's got to be the key for me. So the message I've kind of taken away is that, UCISA are having a lot of very interesting conversations that are going on in the library world, that are going on in the sort of educational development world as well, and in the learning development world, and should be kind of also going into our academics awareness much more. We've really got to collaborate much more. So that's something, and I think the idea of kind of criticality and critical literacies is a really big thing that's affecting how librarians are teaching information literacy. I think we should start thinking about critical digital literacy, which is not just, saying what technology am I using, but kind of thinking that technology is not neutral. Technology is potentially very empowering, but it's also something that excludes people as well. So lots of really positive connections, I think, have come out of today and yesterday. So, yeah, lots to think about.
I've got 3 kind of key messages, and I think the first one is how the JISC definition of digital capabilities and the framework has been resonating with people like yourselves and the audience here. Very much, it's been something a lot of people have talked about it. We've seen a lot of the diagrams in other people's presentations. It resonates. It's something that people can identify with. But I think I'm going to bring to their second key message, which is about kind of just reinforcing the importance that digital capabilities is something for all staff, and all those digital capabilities are important for all those staff, and it doesn't matter where you are. It's the problem that we sometimes face is people think, well, I don't need to know about that, I want to focus on one aspect of digital capability, and that means you then forget the others, but actually those others are often reinforcing or supporting those other capabilities. So digital learning is dependent on digital literacy, digital development is very dependent on digital innovation and digital creation, and it's just those links there. There's more to digital capabilities than just one of those elements. The third thing I'm going to take away, which was really what I wanted to try and get out of this conference, was there interest in having some kind of mechanism or dashboard that would support institutions, help build not just individual digital capability, but also institutional digital capability, and getting all aspects of an organisation to think about and prioritise what it means to be digitally capable.
And does anybody want to comment from the floor or respond to one of the speakers? Anybody want to share their takeaways? No? Right, okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. And I'll draw to an end our rather tamer, I think, question time than what will be tonight with David Dimbleby. I'm tempted to put in the Europe question, but we felt definitely off topic. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Gillian, also for chairing.